We've got some scouts with us tonight, and they're going to come up and lead us in the pledge. Come on up, guys. Thanks, guys. Do we have an affidavit of publication on file?
That's correct.
And a current copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted in the back of the council chambers. We've got one quick presentation tonight. Andrew Rainbolt, Sarpy County Economic Development. Just because we do have a crowd, I know it's not the item you're here for, but it's always a good time for education, and we got 1 second. Economic development in the metro area is a great partnership. If you're sitting down in Florida and you think of Omaha, it's just a big dot on the map. That dot on the map is about 8 counties in 2 states. So Harrison Mills County in Iowa picks up Blair, Fremont comes down, get down to Cass County and picks us up. And so each of those 8 counties has an economic development corporation with membership and a board that really cares about economic development for that county. But the board members of each of those 8 are also a member of an umbrella organization, the Greater Omaha Partnership. And I know he'll mention Facebook real quick. So when we're working with somebody that size, it's that Greater Omaha just saying, hey, come to the bubble, Omaha. And once it comes, then we start figuring out which county is the right one, and then that Economic Development Corporation steps in. So Andrew is the Executive Director of the Sarpy County Economic Development Corporation, and here to give us a quarterly update.
Thank you very much. I know we have a full agenda, so I will be brief. I passed out, hopefully everybody was able to get a copy of our economic indicators for the first quarter of 2017. We have more copies available if you need them. I won't go through that line by line. Suffice to say, nothing out of the ordinary there. Everything continues to trend in a good direction there. I will also very briefly go through our I guess, outcomes for the first quarter. We landed one small project as a retention project that we've been working on. It was in the city of Bellevue, for less than $100,000 in investment. And that is because our Facebook project landed in the second quarter of this year, so we'll count that next quarter. Our project pipeline to start the year was very, very good. Typically we have 7 or 8 projects from out of state that are looking at moving to the area. This quarter we had 12, and we had 13 projects in total. So one project is a company that's already located in Sarpy County. Other 12 are looking at moving to the area or considering Sarpy. So again, a very strong pipeline for us. We had 3 prospect visits, and we always feel that those people who visit in the wintertime or in the first quarter of the year are the most serious. So we think that's a very good sign. We also had 22 existing business calls. So we went out and visited with 22 existing businesses across Sarpy County for the first quarter. And we'd like to get around 75, so we're a little behind pace there, but not too far. Our project types that we're seeing, we had 1 sports and entertainment project. We had 2 warehouse distribution projects, and I would note that those projects continue to grow in size of acres required and size of building as well. I think that's a national trend. Office service projects are what we call call centers or office projects or data centers. We had 5 of those looking at Sarpy this quarter. And manufacturing are important projects for us. We had 4 manufacturing projects this year. And we had 1, or so far this year, I should say. And we had 1 working with 1 current manufacturer that's in Sarpy already. With that, I kind of wanted to cover some of the other things we're working on this first quarter. As Mayor Black mentioned, part of the partnership, we are supporting an industrial market demand study. So we're chipping in some money to hire a consultant to look at our market and decide and kind of evaluate what sites and buildings are available for commercial industrial use. And we feel that we do not have enough sites and buildings available, and we need more. So they're going to take a look at that and compare us to 6 peer cities, so we can take that study to developers and builders and say, hey, there's an opportunity here to build more. We feel like we could capture more projects if we had more sites and buildings available. When we get a call from somebody, the 2 of the main things they're always looking for, we always need a real estate solution, and we need that solution in a certain amount of time. So there's always a time window, and when we have to develop raw ground for that project, typically that makes us a little less competitive. So we feel like if we could induce some maybe speculative development or preparation of some ground, we'd be much more competitive. We also activated our real estate task force. In regards to Facebook, we were able to control the site that they're landing on Highway 50. We control 2 sites out there, and now that they're going to be building, we're looking for a new site. So we will, we're working with about 18 or 20 or so E&A firms from across the metro area, and they're going to help us evaluate sites across Sarpy County. We're looking for rail serve sites, we're looking for data center sites, we're looking for warehouse distribution sites and manufacturing sites. So looking typically in the highway corridors, Highway 34, Highway 50, Highway 31 out in Gretna. So we found that very successful with the Facebook project, and we're going to try to do that again. And I officially wanted to say thank you to the City Council and especially the staff. I know from planning and legal and public works and engineering, everybody touched the Facebook project, and it was probably the biggest one of the biggest projects probably one of the biggest projects the state has ever landed, really, from a capital investment from one user, and that's not lost on the state or any other officials or economic development entities. And so tomorrow I get to go to the Nebraska Economic Developers Association conference. And I get to act like a rock star because we just landed Facebook here. So I thank you for that. But kudos to your staff and Dan and Mayor Black. It was a true team effort, and we appreciate that partnership. With that, I'll wrap it up and answer any questions anybody might have.
Appreciate it. Any council have any questions? Thank you, Andrew.
All right, thank you.
Just because we do have a full house, we've got a few agenda items that as we wrap those up, some people will probably leave, which will free up some seats for those standing. If you are standing and you really do need to sit, there is a conference room right on the side that's got chairs in it. The door's open. You can see in there and you can hear in there. So feel free to move around if you need to for that purpose. Administrator's report, Mr. Hoynes is not here. If people are not aware, haven't been watching the news, Sarpy County had an opening for county administrator. Mark Wayne is retiring at the end of June. Mr. Hoynes was one of 40 applicants for that job. He was one of the 2 finalists that was announced a couple of weeks ago. They had interviews last week, and the county board did make a vote today to select Mr. Hoynes. So he will be the next county administrator, pending some agreements and some final things on a conditional offer. But with that being said, about 3:30 this afternoon, then I announced that Chris Myers will be the interim city administrator, working in during this transition with the sole intent of putting her name up to the city council to be the city administrator, and that will be on the May 16th agenda. So pending confirmation, she will be the interim, and then post confirmation, Chris will be the permanent. So welcome.
Thank you.
Next is consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve, but I'd like to pull C5 and C6.
C5 and C6 are pulled. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Stube. Do we have any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Any council discussion? Please vote on everything except C5 and C6.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item C5, Resolution R170082. A resolution to approve permission to go to bid for the removal and replacement of the Nebraska 85 Washington Street pedestrian bridge with bid advertisement dates of May 10th, 2017, May 17th, 2017, and May 24th, 2017, with a return date and time of May 26th, 2017 and 1 p.m. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R170082? Motion by Councilman Glover.
A second.
Second by Councilman Ingberg. Do we have any proponents? Anybody want to speak on behalf? Please state your name for the record.
Thank you very much, Mr. Black. My name is Andy Rickley, A-N-D-Y. Last name is spelled R-I-K-L-I. Thank you for taking time to listen to us this evening. There's a couple of us from the school district and some from the community that I suspect will be behind me. I'm the current superintendent of schools for Papillion La Vista Community Schools. More importantly, I am the parent of a current Papillion Middle School student with 2 more on the way. Congratulations, by the way, Ms. Myers, on your tentative appointment. We're excited to work with you. One of the things that we're here to discuss tonight and urge the board to hopefully the council to move forward with is demolition of the current overpass and then rebuild for some reasons that you're going to hear later on from some different people. 2 things that I wanted to share with you from the superintendent's perspective. First of all is one that I know you're very well aware of, and that's the traffic flow. When the study looked at the number of students that use that overpass on a daily basis, it numbers, I believe, between 1,400 and 1,500 students a day. Not only is that a student safety issue for very obvious reasons, but that has implications for traffic flow on a major state highway that sees between 30 and 40,000 cars per day. So we think that's a very real issue for both the community as well as the school district. Just as importantly is the cost consideration. This is something I know the council is aware of, but our board took action to approve paying half of the school resource officers, which I need to say we are deeply grateful for the opportunity to have school resource officers in the Papillion La Vista Community Schools. And this city and this council has been incredibly generous in footing the bill for a very long time. One of the things that we took before our board very recently was an agreement, and it was a 20-year agreement, to finance half the cost of the salary and benefits of the SROs that are found in our schools in Papillion city limits. So it was our understanding that that 20-year commitment, which was virtually unheard of to commit to a contract for that length of time, but it was our belief that not only that truly cemented the relationship between the city and the school district, which we think is vitally important, but it was our belief that those dollars, which are new revenue for the city because we aren't paying you anything currently, that would help offset the cost of that bridge, which we understand is considerable. So I would conclude my remarks by saying we understand that it's a very costly endeavor. We understand that there's going to be some short-term pain, but it really is in the best interest of the school district and ultimately for the community, in my opinion, for lots of reasons, which again we'll hear otherwise. And with that, I would conclude my remarks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I meant to make a statement before you got up, but you stayed within it, so we're okay. Just because we have a couple of items where a lot of people want to speak, I'm going to put a 5-minute time limit on speakers. You were under that, so thank you. And nobody has to take the full 5, but at about 4 minutes or so, I will give a 1-minute warning, and that's for all the agenda items just because of the size of the crowd. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, good evening. My name is Lee Danker. I'm also a citizen here of Papillion, and I'm going to bring a few different perspectives to my remarks today regarding the overpass. The first one I'm going to bring is a perspective of a child who grew up a block from the overpass, and that child is me. I use that overpass every day when I would go to the Papillion pool, and sometimes when I would go to school at Papillion Junior High, and also when I would go get an ice cream cone at the Dairy Queen. Mom would always tell me when I left to make sure Lee to be safe and use that overpass. As a parent, I bring a different perspective, and that is that my daughter also went to Papillion Junior High like I did. My wife would bring her every day to the central office parking lot. She would let my daughter and her friends out of the car. They would take that overpass across Washington Street, and my wife would say to her, "Honey, be safe and use that overpass." I wasn't quite sure why that stuck with our family until recently when I asked my mom, "Why did you always say be safe and use that overpass?" And it was when, at that point, that she told me that my neighbor down on Adams Street with the last name of Gruby was hit by a car on Washington Street prior to the building of that overpass. If you don't know it, Papillion was a lot smaller then. There were a lot fewer cars driving through Papillion at that point, and I was unaware that my neighbor was hit by a car. I can understand now why my mom told me, "Lee, be safe and use that overpass," because she cared about kids. And I ask that you care about kids at this moment too. I also bring the perspective of the Papillion La Vista Community School Board, where this year I have the honor of serving as president. As a district, we have partnered with you on safety in many meaningful ways that Dr. Rickley just talked about, and we really do appreciate that partnership, and we thank you very much. Together, I understand as elected leaders that our citizens put us in these offices to put safety first. Washington Street was then, when I was a kid, as it is now, the backbone of our city, and I think you've all done a really good job of maintaining that backbone and the character of the city that I left but moved back to raise my family. Beyond safety, that overpass has become a local landmark. Landmarks give places an identity. They give places character, kind of like this building, kind of like the Boy Scout cabin in the park downtown. I know that I speak for others when I ask you to maintain the character of our charming city by investing in this iconic landmark. Let our kids experience what I got to experience when I walked my daughter over that overpass so she could get an ice cream cone at the Dairy Queen, just like I did when I was a kid. But more than that, make the right choice to invest in safety first for our students and for our families. When given a choice to approve something that achieves two important priorities, it maintains the downtown core and keeps kids safe, I firmly believe that you have a simple choice that I ask you to make. Keep an overpass over Washington Street. Do you remember when I said my neighbor was hit by a car? Ironically, her parents celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary this past weekend with a party down at St. Paul's United Methodist Church. And that young lady, who's now a woman, came back into town to celebrate with her parents. My mom talked to her, and she told her that the city council was considering removing that overpass that was built after she was hit by a car. And she said, Mrs. Danker, please tell your son to tell the city council that if that overpass saves one life, it's worth every penny of investment. And I ask that you do consider that as you make your vote today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do you have any other proponents?
Thank you for the time. My name is Tim Johnson. I'm the principal of Papillion Middle School. And just thank you for the opportunity to discuss the importance. Safety is one of our central values at the school. The overpass plays a large role in assuring our students, parents, and staff peace of mind when needing to cross 84th Street. We have an expectation that all of our students use the overpass when crossing 84th Street. So much so that when a student doesn't, I usually get a phone or email very, very quickly when they don't. No matter the size, the shape of the overpass, I'm more concerned with its purpose and keeping people safe. Students use the overpass because it is a quick, safe way to cross. If we force students to wait at a crosswalk or likewise, they'll be more likely to walk down the block and cross on their own. Not only that, but if parents can't trust their kids being able to walk to school safely, they'll drive them, adding more traffic to 84th Street on an already busy street. The overpass allows better use of our staff to better supervise students around the school and in the building. Using a crosswalk would force us to add supervision. Using a crosswalk would force us to add supervision and take staff outside of school when they could be working with students and sponsoring activities. The overpass not only benefits our students before and after school, but also during activities in the evening. Keeping in mind that our school is used almost every night by outside groups for basketball and volleyball games, tournaments, and other types of community activities. The overpass will benefit not only our school activities, but community activities as well. Finally, our SRO is able to primarily focus their attention on traffic and directing buses in and out of the parking lot. Without the overpass, that role would change and add students crossing the street to the equation. I know there are a lot of factors that go into this decision, but to me the most important one is ensuring student safety. Thank you for this opportunity.
Can you stay up 1 second?
Sure.
Mr. Mumgard has a question.
Okay, you made the statement that you have an expectation that they use it. I need more than an expectation. What do you currently do to see that it's mandatory that they use it, and what will you do in the future if we reconstruct it?
At the beginning of the year when I do my handbook talks, I have a whole slide on 84th Street safety. And we have an expectation from our staff and students that they use that overpass, and there's consequences if they don't. When they get to school in the morning, they're expected to stay there, and that way we can monitor them going back and forth across 84th Street. And usually parents are notified if they're not, because we want to make sure they're safe. And like I said, I can tell you, if they're not using it, our staff reports it, parents report it if they see kids darting across in the morning or after school.
Well, do you now, and would you in the future, if we reconstruct this, would you assign someone there to direct students that they have to use that overpass?
We try to have staff at each exit, and one of those is right now by that overpass to make sure kids are using it, yes. So we'll have supervision there. We have usually 2 or 3 teachers outside to do that, and we can definitely make sure we have someone supervising that.
Is that on both sides of the street?
On our side of the street, we do currently.
Well, what about in the morning when they're coming from the west? How do you enforce that expectation?
Right now, it's through, we get notified by community members in the morning. I do not currently have staff there, but if that was a provision that we needed to have, we could make that happen to make sure that that's used.
Well, yeah, if we commit $2 million to it,
Absolutely.
I think it's fair that staff be placed at both ends of it at the appropriate time. You know, it's one thing to tell even a middle school student, I don't have to tell you this, to tell them that what they're supposed to do and then to see that they do it. Those are 2 different things.
Right.
So I'm looking for commitments that you will take steps to see that they do what you expect them to do. Will you do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other proponents?
Thank you, Mayor Black and City Council, for listening to us tonight. I'm Pat Conway Boyd, a school board member, but basically I'm here tonight as a resident. We've already had people talk about the school issues, and I agree with everything that they're saying. But I think this issue goes far beyond the children that are using Papillion Middle School. I said, you know, really, there's only one reason to build an overpass over a roadway, and it's safety. And the only thing that we keep people safe from is danger. There's no other reason. There's a danger, and we need to do something that diminishes that danger or eliminates it. Nearly 50 years ago, a half a century ago, we had a city council that decided to build an overpass over 84th Street because they recognized it as a danger, and the overpass was the safety to eliminate the danger. They could have put in a stoplight, but obviously we had stoplights back then. I think I remember that. So they could have put in a stoplight, but they didn't seem that to be adequate. They put in an overpass. So there's only 2 reasons to get rid of the overpass. Either the danger has been diminished or eliminated, or people aren't utilizing the safety mechanism that was put in place. Well, we know that the danger hasn't been eliminated. The traffic on 84th Street has only increased over the last 45 years. So we can't argue that the danger on 84th Street has diminished over the last 45 or 50 years. And we know from the study that the city council did, or that the city did, that there's about 1,400 people traveling back and forth over that overpass on a daily basis. So they're using it. And we know that we haven't had any children die or be injured significantly in the last 45 years that it existed, so it's serving its purpose. So there really is no reason to do away with the overpass. We know that the overpass has kept our citizens safe, particularly our children. The decision that this city council has made in the basically the last year, is going to affect the traffic on 84th Street. The half-cent sales tax that we all voted, well, we didn't all vote for because it got by a sneak of a measure. I voted for was for recreational. We have 2 major recreational areas in this city. One's on the east side of this overpass, and one is going to be on the west side of this overpass. And the traffic that's going to end up on 84th Street as people travel between those 2 recreational areas is going to be significant. We're widening Lincoln Road. Why are we widening Lincoln Road? Because we expect there to be more traffic on Lincoln Road because of the recreational area that we're creating. Well, where is the traffic on Lincoln Road going to come from, and where is it going to? Well, a significant amount of it is going to come from 84th Street, and it's going to travel to 84th Street. So the decision to widen Lincoln Road and the decision to build a major recreational area on the west side of the city is going to increase traffic on 84th Street as people travel between those two recreational areas and traffic comes off Lincoln Road. So the danger is going to continue to increase on 84th Street. All of the increases the danger and makes our children at risk. That overpass is going to allow our children to travel from the east side of the recreational area to the west side of the recreational area. And whether they are biking, walking, people are running, and we do have a path that they can take, but it's not very direct path. Kids are going to ride their bikes from Papillion Bay, cut through Howlett Park, get on that overpass, and shoot down Lincoln Road, and vice versa. We take it away, those kids are going to cross 84th Street. So we've knowingly, as a city council, increased the traffic on 81st Street or 84th Street with the decisions that have been made. And if we tear down this overpass and we don't replace it, we will have knowingly taken away the safety mechanism that has kept our children safe for 45 years. We haven't had any accidents. At some point in time, if we take that overpass down and we don't replace it, somebody's getting hurt on 84th Street.
1 minute.
And that's not going to be good for any of us. We are not going to be able to argue that we thought that the traffic had diminished. We're not going to be able to argue that the danger's diminished. We're not going to be able to argue that our safety mechanism didn't work, because it did. And we're not going to be able to argue that nobody was utilizing it. And we're not going to be able to argue that there wasn't a funding mechanism for us to build that bridge. And we're going to end up in a lawsuit, and we're going to pay because we don't have any arguments, and then we're going to rebuild that overpass. So my suggestion is we skip the injured children, we skip the lawsuits, and we just build the overpass so our children can continue to be safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mumgarden.
Yeah, okay. Pat? Whoop. I'm going to ask a question that
Sure.
I represent the north end of town, as you well know.
Which is where I live.
Yes. And I'll ask you a question that some of my neighbors have asked me, and that people in the north end of town have asked me. And I don't want to pick on you. I'll let anybody
Oh, no, you can pick
answer.
on me.
Okay, you make a very valid point about the danger and safety. We're all in favor of keeping kids safe, and we realize that cars going down a street create danger. However, we have at the north end of town a similar situation, which in many respects presents, even more dangers. On Giles Road, Hickory Hills Elementary School on one side, La Vista Junior High on the other. Now, I have constituents who send their middle school kids to La Vista Middle School, and they have to cross, some of them have to cross not only Giles, but 84th Street, Washington Street, two major thoroughfares with a lot of traffic, median in the middle and all that kind of stuff. And they scratched, some of the people I represent scratched their heads and said, what is the deal with the perception of increased danger down in downtown Papillion, where it's 25 miles an hour, and that perception has never been there in the north end of town with Washington Street and Giles. My son went to La Vista Junior High and crossed those two streets every day. Now, did it scare the heck out of me? Of course it did. He was expected to use the crosswalks and those types of things. I would drive Giles every day, and there would be an attendant out in front of the elementary school ushering kids across the street. Why is that not also the answer for downtown Papillion?
Well, I would argue, number one, that Giles Road really is not as busy as 84th Street, especially in the morning going to school. Because that traffic, I had 1 year, I know, crazy woman, I had one child that attended Papillion Middle School, and I had the other one that attended La Vista Middle School the same year. So I dropped off at La Vista Middle School, and then I drove down 84th Street and dropped off at Papillion Middle School. That traffic gets backed up badly. And now what do? You back up the traffic on 84th Street with another stoplight, And you know what happens when people get frustrated with sitting at stoplights too long? They start taking chances. And when they take chances, they run through that yellow light that's almost red. That kid decides to run across that intersection when there's 1 second left on the pedestrian walkway. Because if I get into the intersection, I'm ready to go, right? I'm okay. Sad thing is, he went in with 1 second and his friend behind him chased in after him. So I think the other argument is, we've established an overpass on 84th Street, which basically communicates that it's dangerous. To take it away now is to set yourself up. If you never had an overpass on 84th Street, then you're not in as bad a situation when you go to argue that, yes, a child got hurt there. But the fact that you've had it there for 50 years, now you remove it. When a child does get hurt, you have no argument. It's not any busier than Giles Road. Well, that might be true, but this city determined it dangerous enough to put an overpass in, and now you've removed the safety mechanism. And when you remove a safety mechanism that was in place for a reason, it's different than if you've never had the mechanism. Would I like to put overpasses over every busy street that we have in Papillion and La Vista because of the schools? Absolutely. But this is a special situation. You had a city council that a half a century ago determined that to be a dangerous place. It hasn't gotten any safer, probably has gotten more dangerous. So the fact that you have it and you remove it is the issue that you're dealing with from a standpoint of taking something away that kept people safe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do we have any other proponents? Anybody just want to speak on behalf?
My name is Pamela Karasik. I have an 8th grader that attends Papillion Middle School and a daughter at Trumbull who will be at Papillion Middle School in 2 more years.
Can you pull the microphone down just a little bit, because we are recording it for the minutes.
Is that better?
That is, thank you.
Maybe not.
That works.
There we go. And I would also specifically like to address Mr. Mumgard's remarks about how I think the situation is more dangerous for Papillion Middle School and the situation that we have there with regards to 84th Street. My daughter walks to school in the mornings and uses the overpass, and in the afternoon I pick her up on the administration side, so I watch as she comes across the overpass, and I sit there and usually watch for about 10 to 15 minutes as all the kids come out of school, and it's probably the happiest place in Papillion at 3:10 in the afternoon. Those kids are really excited to get out of school, and my daughter usually says, "Can you wait an extra 5 minutes? It's the best time of my day with my friends." And the fact of the matter is that Papillion Middle School is right on 84th Street, which is not the situation with La Vista Middle School. So when the kids are crossing the street and they're coming out of the school, all those kids are right on 84th Street. And they're all interacting with each other. And while they're the happiest at that point, they're not the most focused. And they're not the most competent probably at that point in the day. And so they're very distracted by their friends, and if you've ever seen 12 to 14-year-olds walking around, they're also very distracted by their phones or their friends' phones. So they're looking at their friends, they're looking down at their phones, and they're really not looking at their surroundings. So I think that plays a lot into the danger of being right on 84th Street when they're trying to cross the street. They're in large groups. There's a larger number of them trying to cross the street at one time when they come over the overpass. They usually travel over that overpass in groups, which actually there's quite a large social aspect to using the overpass, which I think is why there's not as much of a problem with using the overpass as opposed to 1 and 2 people trying to run across the street. They use it all together. It's kind of a social thing to walk across with your buddies. But it's interesting, I watch them as they get over the overpass, and then they try and negotiate the side streets to get to their parents' car, or to get to the Beanery coffee shop, or to get further down to the gas station, and they have a lot of problems on the side streets. It's pretty scary. As they're talking to their buddies and trying to walk across, they're not watching the turning traffic coming off of 84th Street onto the side streets, onto Grant or onto Sherman. And Today, one girl, not even distracted by friends or a cell phone, walked straight across Adams Street behind the administration building in front of a moving vehicle, never saw it. She didn't look left, she didn't look right, and thank heavens that car stopped because she never saw it. I assume she was walking to her parents' vehicle. She easily could have been hit. And with the current detour, it's even a scarier situation. I know that's completely a necessary thing for the construction going on, but daily watching these kids try and negotiate those smaller side streets with cars moving at only 10 to 15 miles an hour as they are cautiously watching for those kids is very scary. And thinking about the possibility of them negotiating 84th Street with a gas station that has multiple turn-ins and a turn lane coming off of Lincoln Street. And those kids not understanding that if someone turns off of Washington Street, then decides to make a turn into the gas station, they need to be watching multiple cars coming from multiple directions, making multiple turns if they're gonna be using that light at the intersection, really frightens me. My current 8th grader is a very cautious
1 minute.
planner, and she would be great type of kid to use, you know, the stoplight there and use the crosswalk. My one coming up in 2 years, not so much. Super impulsive. There's no way I could count on her to use a crosswalk. It scares me to death to think that there would be no overpass for her to use. So I'd ask you to take into consideration the skills that our kids have to negotiate these kinds of things, not to mention the distracted drivers on the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other proponents? If you'd state your name for the record.
Yes, I have to raise it up though. I am Melissa Panko, and I am the president of the Papillion Middle School Parent-Teacher Network. And I am speaking here on behalf of all of the, well, every parent that I have spoken to at the middle school in regards to this issue. But I am also speaking as a parent that has had a child that was hit by a vehicle. As a lifelong resident of Papillion, I cannot imagine the city without the overpass. I've lived here my whole life, and that's part of Papillion. I think it is vital to the safety of our children. I think it is a project that the city of Papillion could take on with great pride and great attention. I think it would bring about more cohesiveness within the city, because it is a project not just for fun and connection, like the First Street Plaza, but it is a project that protects our citizens, both young and old, which is much more important in my opinion. So as a parent with 2 children attending 2 different schools in this district, I am grateful for the wonderful schools that we have. And I know that the city of Papillion is grateful for the wonderful schools that we have, because when you look on the website, having great schools is the top reason in both Money Magazine for Papillion being a great place to live and the city's own press release in January 2013. So since Papillion's great schools benefit the city in both recognition and in bringing taxpayers to the area, I think the city should continue what it started when it helped fund the original overpass. The overpass has become a vital part of the makeup and functionality of the city. I believe that the city should fund the overpass project, or in the least, secure funding from the state, because it is a state highway, which I think is very important to remember when we talk about busyness. Giles Road is not a state highway. Another reason that I wanted to speak with you today is to reiterate to you the importance of having this overpass in regards to safety. This summer, my daughter was crossing First Street right along 84th Street, and she was in the crosswalk, which is where kids are supposed to be, with a walk sign. The driver turned right on red without even looking at her. Struck her bike. Praise the Lord. She is okay. She has no lasting or severe injuries. Like, very, very grateful for that. But I received that phone call. I know what it's like as a parent to receive a phone call that your child has been hit by a vehicle. And it's a horrifying phone call. And I don't wish it upon anyone. And what a tragedy it would be. I mean, such a tragedy if we were there when someone got struck in front of the middle school. It would just be a horrible tragedy. But thankfully, right now we have that overpass. And it is there to keep students safe from both their own missteps, as we all know they have, but also for distracted drivers.
Just 1 second. If we could keep the conversation in the audience down, it really does travel in here. Thank you.
So not only do I send my children over the overpass, but I use the overpass. Probably a little too much, because that means that we are taking our dog to Dairy Queen for ice cream. And, that's not always good for the waistline. But I also allow my kids to use it in the summer to go visit my parents at work. And I know that they're going to be safe crossing 84th Street because they're using the overpass.
1 minute.
I appreciate that. Because we all know, well, I know now that crosswalks are not even guaranteed safety places to be. So I would ask that the city continues making safety a big priority for its residents by rebuilding the overpass and letting parents have a sense of security regarding their kids and even themselves when it comes to crossing 84th Street. Just as I send my kids over the overpass, one day my children might be sending their kids over that same overpass, or the new one, that makes Papillion into an even tighter knit community than it already is. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much. Any other proponents? Yes.
Hi, I'm Connie Bound, and I'm also on the Papillion School Board. And I'm probably one of the oldest ones on the school board, because I remember going to Papillion Middle School when it was still the junior, senior high school, and trying to get across 84th Street so we could go to Spanish class. I'll tell you that 84th Street was backed clear up to Lincoln and clear up to 3rd Street. And I just don't think we have the traffic lights to control that flow of traffic where you do on Giles. I have not been down Giles Road that somebody hasn't sped around me right down there at the crosswalk where the kids go across to Hickory Hill. And I think you're just gonna encourage more traffic jams if we don't have that overpass to go across to get those kids safely over to the other buildings. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other proponents? Anybody want to speak in favor? Do we have any opponents? Anybody want to speak against? Neutral? All right. Council discussion. Oh, yes, sir.
Mark Flott, I asked about this, but
Can you redo your name real quick? Just
yeah,
so we have
my name's Mark Flott.
Thank you.
And I just did a Google search, and I did not see in the Papillion Public Works, was there an engineering study done the economic analysis that said, because we built Dodge Street for a delay of 60 seconds. And what's going to happen when you're stopping the traffic in downtown Papillion, and you're going to deter people from downtown Papillion. But the biggest thing is I went and did a Google search on Papillion Public Works site on the overpass, because I know in 1985 they did do a study on that, and because I remember Crooker Michael was involved with it, but I did not see anything in the Public Works thing, and that's all. I was just wondering if there was an engineering study on that. So,
Mr. Ingberg, you had a comment, but I'll look to Mr. Thompson to answer the question.
No.
Okay.
I'll wait till everybody's done.
I'm not sure I quite understand the question as far as an engineering study. We had a third-party engineering firm come out and do an inspection, a physical inspection and chain testing of the structure itself, which determined that there's severe degradation of the existing system. But as far as,
because generally they do a traffic flow and say, okay, if this is delayed and the traffic's deferred and where it's going to go, how that's going to impact the downtown area. Like I said, they built Dodge Street for $250 million for 60-second delay, that overpass. So what's going to happen when you got people with stoplights going downtown? I mean, the crosswalk, and kids in the morning are doing the traffic crossing. That's all I'm asking. Somebody should do a study of this. It's not that hard to do and justify it and say, okay, this is going to be your cost. Okay, it might be easier to do the economic analysis, and then, okay, it might be cheaper to have 12 full-time people out there all day long. I'm just saying, is do an economic analysis and do a study. It's not that hard to do.
Thank you. Any other proponents or neutral? Welcome.
Hi, I'm Gene Fall. Live in a Papillion SID, but I have a business right here in Papillion. And I did go to that high school, or when it was a high school down there. The one thing that I guess the only thing I want to mention, and I'm assuming the council members know this, but nobody's mentioned it. And I talked to Rose Gruby's dad today on a speakerphone with his son-in-law. And some of the things that we found out through that and some other conversations is when it was built, we think in the 70s, when the overpass was built, about 73-ish or something like that. We think it was 25% city, 25% school, and 50% state. I'm not 100% sure on that. And I guess I'm just looking for, can something like that be done again? And I do believe we need the overpass.
Thank you. And that research was done, so we'll have that for the vote, and we'll handle that on the council discussion real quick.
I have a comment for Gene. I had that same question. We went looking into that. Now, why was it that back 20 some odd years ago the state felt that they could invest money in that overpass, but now they don't? They told us it's completely our responsibility. It is a state highway, and I understand that we like to have control over that street and that highway, but I was also troubled by the state's refusal to participate the same way, at least in somewhat in the same way that they did years ago. I just point out that that's something that would need to be brought up by the state representatives, because the state, after we questioned, told us not a dime.
Right, and I don't know if this is something that has to go through legislature down there in Lincoln. I don't know, but I would think that that's something that could be pursued somehow a little bit more firmly. I don't know.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Appreciate that. Previous question was asked about a study, and that is part of the staff report. It's about a 42-page technical study that is part of the staff report. Mr. Ingberg.
Are we with everybody? Okay.
We're done with proponents and opponents, and again, just for the public, because of how many there are, and we'll have another topic. When we have a public hearing, that is for us to take testimony. Council member can ask clarifying questions, not really debate Q&A between the public and the council. But once the public hearing is closed, we move to council discussion, and that's kind of what we're into now. On this topic, we have council discussion and a vote tonight. On the RV one, we'll have that in 2 weeks. Tonight will just be a public hearing. Mr. Ingberg.
Well, not to take too much time, but when we first became aware of the need to either replace it or remove it because of safety reasons, I'll tell you, I kept trying to focus myself on the purpose of it, which is to move people safely from point A to point B, because too many other things were starting to enter into it. All due respect to Mr. Danker and the other young lady that came forward, I'm not going to spend millions of dollars on something that's a landmark or an iconic landmark. Just my personal opinion, living here all my life, when people say, what are landmarks for Papillion? An overpass isn't it. But I understand your opinion, and I respect that. But when we talk about safety, I kept going back to this, and Connie will attest to this, and so will Gene. I was hoping I wouldn't be the oldest person here, and I'm glad they're here, so I'm not. But the thing I struggled with initially was this. The overpass, I'm old enough, I went to that senior high school when it was a senior high school, and where the administration building sits today was the middle school, housed primarily 7th and 8th graders. And there was a steady parade of students back and forth across 84th Street the entire 8 periods of the day, because they had to go back to the other school for PE. They had to use the where the administration building is now. They had to use that for the library. We had class on both sides of 84th Street. Lunch was on the east side of 84th Street. So that's why that overpass was placed there. Was it a safety issue? Yes, but it was more of a practical issue, which was getting bulks of students back and forth for the entire school day out of convenience and out of safety. Well, when I look at it today, it serves a different purpose. It still serves safety, but what it doesn't serve are students crossing it all day long, which was the original purpose. So I struggle with spending millions of dollars to replace something that today is used by our own study, by our staff, to move kids before school and after school to their vehicles primarily to get taken home from school or dropped off. Doesn't diminish the safety of it though. So when we talk about it, I've struggled with the state not offering to contribute a penny, like Councilman Mumgard said. He and I are both dismayed by that. Department of Roads decided they were going to participate, and that was it. So it leaves it to us. I pulled this off the consent agenda because I wanted everybody to have a chance to come to the podium. I wanted the council a chance to discuss it. One thing I will say, if we vote to go out for the demolition or for the bids, are we making some commitment to do it? Yes. On the other hand, I think it's important to remember, if bids come in that are too high, it doesn't make it necessary that we have to approve it. We could also at that point go out for another, let out for bids again, or decide we can't afford to do it. But I think it's a good first step to go out and do the bids and see what price we have in mind, because we, through our own city engineer, have a good idea to do it. So while as a former police chief, I'm always on the side of safety, I think. And as much as I think the need for it has changed dramatically and people have forgotten that, and not through no fault of their own, they weren't here perhaps and had to use it back in 1971, 72 and thereabouts. I still think it comes down to this, the bottom line. As long as the school is going to make some commitment, I'm glad to hear that today, to make sure that it gets used, because, 2 days ago I happened to be going down 84th Street early when school was, kids were getting dropped off. I saw 2 or 3 kids just run across 84th Street. Didn't use the overpass. I thought, we're going to spend millions of dollars. I want it used because it's for safety. So I will say that my philosophy really, in some respects, when it comes to an issue like this, the purpose of government is to do no harm. And I think if we don't build it, there's a potential that we could do some harm. Is it a guarantee no one's ever going to get struck at 84th Street? No. Are we going to start getting requests from other school locations to build these? Perhaps. But as people said tonight, it primarily has to do with the traffic counts and those issues. So I have some reservations, but again, do no harm. And I think we need to support it, and I think we need to do it for the right reason, which is moving people A to B safely.
Mr. Stubbe.
Thank you, Mayor. This is conflicting for me as a council member, and I think it was conflicting for council members back in the early 70s when they voted on this. And Gene, you are correct, is that staff did an excellent job of looking at history of this. And at the time that the overpass was considered, it was initiated by the school district based on exactly the reasons that were stipulated today. And the state did agree to pay 50%. The school district paid 25%, and the city paid 25%. And that took 2 city council votes in order for the city council to agree to kick in 25%. So there was a significant amount of issues even back then in the early 70s relative to this. And I do want to bring up a couple points with regard to studies. And as an engineer, I'm conflicted because I try to look at the analysis, the evaluation that goes into this. And I think we need to really understand that the bridge that was put in back in the early 70s The new one proposed is going to be significantly different. And the difference when it comes is to the length of the travel. And the current pedestrian bridge is about 360 feet long, and the proposed bridge, because of meeting new regulations, and typically it's American Disability Act regulation, requires that it's got to be 600 feet long. And what that introduces into a situation where the potential is that if you have to walk significantly longer than what it would be to cross at the street, you're potentially not going to take that particular bridge. Now understand, Dr. Rickley's indicated and the principal's indicated a commitment to forcing kids to use that. The other thing that it does is that it gives an expectation to drivers that people are going to be using the bridge. They're not going to be darting across the street. And it's no different than an expectation as a driver. If you're sitting in a queue and you see a traffic signal turn green or you see an arrow turn green, your expectation is to move. And if somebody stops in front of you, the potential is that you could end up getting into a crash. And that's the expectation drivers are going to have if they're traveling down 84th Street and they see a pedestrian bridge there. They're not necessarily going to expect that people are going to be running across the road. But the potential is, because of the significant difference in length, that people will take a look at that and say, I'm not going to cross at that particular pedestrian bridge, I'm going to go across the street and try to shoot the gap. I also want to indicate there was some concerns relative to having pedestrians cross at an intersection. In this particular case is that you cannot put in a dedicated pedestrian signal at an intersection. You have to be offset from the intersection. So by putting a pedestrian signal in proximity to the front door of the school, eliminates those turning movements. And so you'd have a dedicated pedestrian signal at that particular location. I agree with Mr. Mumgard from the perspective is that the school district is coming to us and asking us to build an overpass, but we have many other locations, and Mr. Mumgard pointed those locations out. And my concern would be is that, okay, let's say an elementary school kid is injured on Giles Road where we have that current ped signal. Is the school district going to come back to us and ask us to put in a pedestrian overpass at those particular locations? Do we open the door out for those types of situations? So I'm conflicted with regard to what's being proposed in comparison to what exists there today, because I have a real concern about whether it's going to get used other than the commitment that's being made by the school district. Now I know the school district also indicated that they made a commitment to participate with the SROs, and that's great, and I appreciate that. I'm not sure I consider that being germane to this particular issue, and I'd like to see the school district consider at least contributing to the construction of the bridge. They contributed back in at least 25% back in the early 70s. The city has taken on the maintenance of that particular facility for the 45 years that it's been in operation, and staff did go through and actually look at the agreements relative to the Department of Roads and ask the question, and they will not contribute. They consider it as being an appurtenance to the highway, and so they figured that they don't have any jurisdiction or responsibility for that particular pedestrian overpass. So as I indicated, I'm conflicting. I'd like to hear some of the other council members' comments before I make a decision. Thank you.
Mr. Jaworski.
I'm struggling with this also, and here are my reasons. In the 70s, things were a lot different. There weren't school zones. We didn't even wear seatbelts back in the 70s. So a lot of things have changed. And what I'm struggling with, and I stopped off at Giles Road in Edgewood before I came here. From curb to curb, that's 81 feet for them kids to get across that street. I stopped downtown where the bridge is. Curb to curb, it's 45 feet. Why are we saying this is more dangerous for the kids downtown than it is for the kids on Edgewood? Kids are kids, streets are streets. I think both are just as important. I think if we build one, we build two. That's the way I feel. We're struggling to get the money for one. How are we going to do two? I don't know. I'm struggling with this. I don't know what I'm going to, like I said, like Mr. Stubbe said, I'm going to listen to the other colleagues and see how they come up with this and where we go. But to me, and I didn't even think about coming across the Giles, you got another 80 feet there probably to get across the street before you even get to Edgewood. So I don't know how we're saying the kids downtown are more important than the kids to the north, because the kids to the north are kids, just like the kids downtown. All kids are important. And I understand, listening to Mr. Ingberg, why they used it back in the 70s, because they took a lot of people across that for different things. But for now, all it is to get kids to school and back to school. I'm going to struggle with this. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to listen to the rest of the guys and see what. To be honest, I'm 50-50. I understand it's there. The smartest thing to do is rebuild it. But in the 70s, we had help. We're not getting help here other than what you guys are providing through the ROs. But other than that, yes, it would be nice to see the state chip in here too, because it is important. But for me, to vote for this, I'd almost like to amend the motion and say we build one at Giles and Edgewood too. Thanks.
Mr. Mumgard.
Dr. Rickley, could you come forward, please? Mr. Stubbe makes a point that I think we need to talk a little bit more about. We received an engineering study. People who do this for a living have looked around and they've told us that it's a waste of money to build an overpass and expect kids to use it. The kids don't use it. They see it over and over again. And when we build this, because of the design changes, we're making it harder to use than the current one. So yes, sitting here and thinking that this overpass is really even going to be used as much as it is used now is a little bit difficult to come to that conclusion. That's why I was asking your school principal, okay, what are you going to do to make it more likely that these experts' premises are not our situation here? And I want to ask you, as the boss of the school district there, all due respect to the board members, the administrative boss, will you impose a policy that makes it mandatory for staffing to be placed, on both sides of the street at the appropriate time to make kids use the overpass? Because expectations are one thing, but mandatory is mandatory. And I even played with the idea of, well, why don't you build a fence, nice pretty fence on the other side, on the west side of the street there, so that the kids can't cross back and forth. They have to use that overpass. Just looking for ways to make them use the overpass. And will you, as the superintendent, make that commitment that that will be the policy of the school district?
Yeah, the short answer, Mr. Mumgard, is absolutely yes. And I think with respect to engineering studies don't occur in a vacuum. There's lots of history, there's lots of context, there's lots of factors that an engineer, with all due respect to the training they bring to the table, can't take into consideration given the history that we have with this particular bridge. And the history that we have with this particular bridge says when it was built in the 70s, it was used for a very different purpose, but it serves an equal number of students today. And in fact, I would argue probably a greater number today, even though the purpose has changed over time. But you have a firm commitment from me as the superintendent of schools. You have a firm commitment from the 3 Board of Education members, and I would say all 6. You have a firm commitment from our principal. We can do what we've currently done, if that's sufficient. And if that means we need to do something different, we're willing to take that on too with regard to supervision. One of the things that Mr. Johnson, that we didn't share was that we have a school resource officer, again, thanks to the support of this council. So between principal, teachers, paraeducators, school resource officer, we are currently utilizing them in a way to supervise. And if that's something we need to beef up to put the city council's mind at ease, then that's certainly something we would do. And Mr. Stubbe, with all due respect, I really do think, I would respectfully disagree. I do believe the SRO agreement is very germane to this topic. I can't speak for Mayor Black or Mr. Hoynes, but when we entered into this negotiation with regard to SROs, there was, for lack of a better term, a gentleman's agreement, or it was my understanding, perhaps the council and city administration would disagree. There was a handshake agreement that we would generate new revenue for the city through this SRO agreement in return for a rebuilt bridge. So I understand the council may have a different perspective on that. Our board and our administration has a slightly different take on that.
Okay, well, I'll build on that, because first off, thank you and the board for pitching in on the SRO and helping pay for that. I do see a connection there that our responsibility is public safety. Your responsibility is to educate the kids. But the SRO kind of makes it an overlap. And so, yes, I see that you're pitching in to pay for the SRO helps us with public safety.
Correct.
If you can use that SRO or staff members or whatever to achieve the public safety goal that we have and make sure that the kids use the overpass. You know, and I will say another thing, I want to ask for a commitment, but I do see a distinction there between what we're talking about down by the middle school and up on Giles, in that you've got two things going there. One, it is used at other times other than just for kids coming and going to school. The park is down there, the ice cream store, all that kind of stuff. And secondly, I like the idea that the central district, the central office parking lot is used as a drop-off and pickup point, because people using the driveway in front of the middle school creates congestion, creates turning problems. And so I would ask that the school and the district do as much as you can to encourage people, parents, to use that parking lot as their drop-off spot. They don't need to drop the kid off right in front of the door if we spend $2 million to get the kids safely over from the parking lot to the door. And so please take whatever steps you can to see that that parking lot is used as part, because then it returns to a similar situation back in the 70s, that your function needs both sides of the street, and we'll help you do that. So
it's a great point, Mr. Mumgard, and one of the things that Mr. Johnson and his team have done just in the last year alone is to try to push traffic to alternate routes, because not only does it create some traffic issues, but that whole drop-off pickup dynamic is very dicey. So we don't see this as if the board is gracious enough, if the council is gracious enough to push forward with this, that we're done, we've got what we wanted, we're walking away. We see this as the beginning of the conversation with the council, with the police department, about what we can do to make this better for all of us. So please know that, and I believe the council understands, we have a very good relationship with Mayor Black and Mr. Hoynes. They've been terrific partners, and if you move ahead with this, we would expect that conversation would continue. One last thing. To Mr. Jaworski's point, I think your point about the overpass, all kids matter, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you nailed it. One slight difference, though, between what we're talking about with other schools and what we've seen at Papillion Middle School, part of it's just a sheer numbers game. Last year's enrollment, we're down slightly this year. We were over 800 students. A typical elementary such as Hickory Hill is about 400 students. So I'm not saying that it's a matter of Papillion students are more important than Hickory. You know that's not true, and I know that's not true. But what I would tell you is there is a unique dynamic at Papillion Middle School, and you're just talking about a sheer numbers game of 700 kids plus parents in a tightly congested area compared to an area where there's about 400 kids at an offset school location.
Mr. Glover.
Well, I don't think it's any secret that the rest of the council knows where I stand on this issue. I would like to make a couple comments, because it just boggles my mind that this bridge was built, and you can say it was to move students back and forth, but really, if you talk to the old people of this town, people like me that have been around forever, that thing was built for one reason. That's because 2 girls got hit crossing that street when there wasn't a bridge there. 45 years ago, and Bob's right, the city council struggled with this decision to build this bridge, but you know what? For 45 years, we've not had anyone get hit on the bridge. And I stress that, on the bridge. Well, when this overpass was built, there wasn't a hospital on the other end of town. There is today. There's emergency units going up and down that street on a daily basis, whether it's from Ralston or one of the other communities or whether it's our own people. When you look at the engineering study, and I think engineers are great, so don't take offense to this, but you know, engineers design things that work in theory. And in theory, in a perfect world, everything works. So if you've tried to find a battery in your car and it's underneath the car instead of inside the car, if you've had problems with engineering, it's not necessarily that they're tuned into what the real world is all about. And you know, the reality of it is that, you know, there's many distractions with cars and drivers. And why would we take one chance? And you know, I hear all this about, well, this street's more is bigger and deserves a crossing more than the other streets do. But the reality of it is this bridge is here, and we need to do something with it. And I'm telling you, the engineering study doesn't take into account that for 45 years, this community's been safe. There was an article in the newspaper here about a month ago, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit of it, but it does, you know, it does say exactly what we're talking about tonight. And it says pedestrian deaths on the rise nationally and locally. And it says researchers think the biggest factor in more drivers and walkers being distracted is from cell phones and electronics. And I don't think that's a shock to anybody, but it's a distractor. And not having that bridge there will be a distractor. In Nebraska, we have the pedestrian deaths have increased 86% over the last 5 years. We average in Nebraska 1 pedestrian death a day in Nebraska. Why would we take that chance? It makes no sense to me. We have a funding source. We're not going to have to raise taxes. It makes no sense. And probably what bothers me more than anything is that from the people that we hire, we've had input from them that whether it's the police chief that says the safest is to rebuild, whether it's other staff members, whether it's the school district that knows kids and knows how important it is to keep those kids safe. It makes no sense to me why we would not push forward, go out to bid, and I will have to agree with Steve. Hopefully, if the bids come in to where we would anticipate they would be, we would move forward and build that bridge. If not, then I think we need to sit back down and look at it again.
Mr. Florence.
Yeah, so I take a look at this, and I will tell you when, you know, I actually challenge some of the logic that's been used. You know, I had 5 kids go to that junior high. And, you know, when we talk about 1,400 kids using it on a daily basis, that's up and back. I don't actually think those numbers are right, because that means 700 kids are going in the morning, 700 kids are going at night, and there's 800 kids at the school. So not sure that's true. You know, when I look at it and you say, okay, I appreciate the district saying we'll put someone out there, and then I think, well, wait a minute. One of the things we said earlier was we wanted resources in the school doing what resources have to do besides monitoring kids. So there's a little disconnect there. I also don't believe that every kid can be kept safe, because I don't believe we can force them to go across the pedestrian bridge. Kids are kids. So there's lots of reasons that I disagree with this. And now I'm going to say, and the fact that the district steps up and is saying we're willing to pay for it, says it's important to them. And I think when this first came up, my biggest thing was, okay, $2 million a year, crossing guards 3 hours a day in the morning, 3 hours a day at night, in the afternoon, pay them $20 an hour, I think it's like 150 years to before you exhausted that budget. But the district says we're willing to pay for that. It's that important, and so I would support it, with the caveat that should it come in over this budget and now we have a shortfall, I would revisit it.
Ms. Klug.
Thank you. I looked at this for a long time because I think, you know, what's the population going to the school versus the population paying the taxes? What percentage are we affecting? And I looked at it for a long time. I realize there are things, and I appreciate that the school has come up and said, you know what, we're going to assist with the cost of the resource officers. I never heard that it was associated with the bridge. I don't consider them the same. I'm not sure what agreements happen with handshakes. I just know what contracts say. So to me, they are two separate issues. I also heard tonight that, sure, we'll put as many teachers out there as we need to get these kids onto the bridge to make sure they stay safe. And we're going to put a lot of resources towards this. But we have the study that says no, they're not going to use it. I'm thinking, what about when we're not there? What about when it's the kids at the summertime with the ice cream? Even though mom says use the bridge, maybe not all kids are as good as Mr. Dinker was when he was little and used the bridge. You know, I'm sure you never crossed the street, never. You know, so I sat here and I thought, well, what's wrong with that ground level? If we can put all those teachers out there to force kids onto the bridge, can't we do the same thing and put them at ground level? And then the driver expectations that Bob, Mr. Stubbe here talked about, we've already built driver expectations that there's going to be kids on the ground, that we need to watch them. So I have all these great reasons why I would say we shouldn't vote for this, that we really are utilizing money for something that we can most likely keep our kids safe at. And then I really think about it, and you know what? The expectation is there's a bridge. There's an incredibly safe mechanism to get our kids across, and my biggest hope and my biggest dream is that should the bids come in correctly, that if we start teaching these kids by in junior high or before to use them, that they'll use them even when we don't have teachers out there telling them what to do. And even if mom's not there taking them to ice cream with the puppy, that these kids will understand truly the bridge is there for a reason, and it's not to be the gateway to our downtown. We're not building it to be an icon. We're building it for safety. It has to be for safety. Thank you.
Any other council discussion? If not, please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next on the agenda, item C6, Resolution R170083. A resolution to approve an interlocal cooperation agreement with Papillion La Vista School District 0027, doing business as Papillion La Vista Community Schools number 27, regarding the proposed demolition of the 84th Street pedestrian bridge and possible construction and installation of additional improvements within and abutting the school district properties. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R170083? Motion by Councilman Glover. Second by Councilman Ingberg. Do you have any proponents? And all the comments from the previous one will carry over to this one, so we don't need to repeat unless you want to. See no proponents. Any opponents? Any other council discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item E1, Ordinance 1764. An ordinance to amend Section 205-249C4 of Chapter 205 Zoning, Article 36, off-street parking, having to do with the parking of recreational vehicles on a single lot in a residential district, and to provide for an effective date. This is a public hearing. Unlike the previous one where we had a lot of discussion going back and forth, council discussion and a vote, this one is only a public hearing tonight. The discussion and the vote will be at the next city council meeting on the 16th. So tonight we're listening, taking testimony. Council member could ask a question if they elect to. Also, there are some seats freed up front if you want those. Again, the conference room is open if somebody needs a break. Noticed on the last one I did do a 5-minute time limit. I'm going to do the same one on this one. I'll try to watch the clock, give a 1-minute warning, and we'll honor that on all of those. And Mr. Sturzma, from a staff perspective, I'm going to ask him to make an introduction as to set the stage. And then I will call for proponents. Anybody in favor? Then we'll call for opponents. We'll close the public hearing and we'll move on to the next item. I did not mention when we took the roll, and I know this is an important topic for him. Mr. Gaines is not here today. That is an excused absence. He's got a child that's in the hospital, so that's why he's not here. Mr. Sturzma. And for those that are not aware, Mr. Sturzman is the planning director for the city of Papillion.
Am I on? Okay, good. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for this opportunity to give a quick summary about what is being considered. This is both for your benefit and obviously for the benefit of our audience tonight. I wanted to start with just briefly talking about what our rules are today, and then I'll summarize what is being considered for change. Currently, we regulate recreational vehicles and trailers on residential property differently. We regulate motorized recreational vehicles based on classification and vehicle type. We regulate trailers by length. So today, if you have a trailer longer than 20 feet, it's not permitted to be parked other than for loading and unloading on that property. However, for motorized vehicles, we restrict Class A, which is the largest types. We do allow Class B and Class C. The average length of, or a typical length of a B would be 19 to 24 feet. Of a Class C would be 24 to 36 feet. And so that's allowed today, along with any trailers 20 feet or less. So that's where we are. What is being considered for change, the language of Ordinance 1764 is to add under recreational vehicles a sentence basically that says, notwithstanding the foregoing, no recreational vehicle that exceeds 20 feet in length may be parked in a front, street side, or interior parking zone. So that's what Ordinance 1764 says. What does that mean? It does not change the restriction on Class A motorized recreational vehicles. It does not change the length on trailers. And so anything under 20 or anything over 20 feet would continue to be restricted. But it would put a length restriction on the Class Bs and Cs. Those are the vehicles that are allowed today. This would put a length restriction on those similar to what we do with trailers. There is a provision that would only be applied in the front, street side, and side yard. That's how it's currently written. So what would be allowed under Ordinance 1764? Continue to allow trailers 20 feet or less in length, and would allow Class B or C, but only up to a length of 20 feet. So again, we're looking at the length. That's what is being considered. So this has gone to Planning Commission. We had our introduction at our last meeting. Tonight is the public hearing where we hear comment from the public. As you already stated, Mayor Black, that the council will make a decision at the next meeting. Since the Planning Commission discussion, there has been some further discussion by the Public Safety Committee on this ordinance. And there have been 3 general items that they would like considered for amendment to the language of Ordinance 1764. The first one is to consider simplifying the method of enforcement. We call that the box method. I think one thing has become clear, and that is our ordinance is not clear. Using vehicle types or classifications of vehicles creates confusion. If the intent is to regulate by size, we should just regulate by size. And so that's what the box method would do. The dimensions that have been proposed are 20 feet in length, which is consistent with Ordinance 1764, and then 10-foot width and a 12-foot height. And that method also, I should add, is consistent with how the police regulate on-street parking of vehicles. Some things to consider with the box method, in addition to the dimensions, although I would add that that does allow an opportunity for discussion of length and size, whereas the vehicle types, that becomes more challenging. Ease of understanding is one reason for that change. I would like to clarify that right now the proposal is that we would not measure appurtenances, bike rack on the back, a spare tire on the back, air conditioner unit on the roof, or a satellite dish. Those wouldn't be included in the box. That would be taking a vehicle that's in compliance, you throw a bike rack on the back, it's out of compliance. That doesn't seem right. And also, as written, the box method is applied to all yards. So if the intent is to make any exception to that, it would have to be discussed. So that's amendment number 1. Amendment number 2 is, and this is a long title, but it's the Special Designated Recreational Vehicle Parking Permit. What does that mean? It's essentially a waiver. It's a waiver where if you're legal today, you can get a permit to continue what you're doing. So as I mentioned, trailers are already limited to 20 feet, so it would not apply to any trailers over 20 feet, but it would apply to those Class B and Class C motorhomes or motorized motorhomes, where within a certain period of time after the adoption of this ordinance, you could come and get a permit from the city to allow you to continue to park that particular vehicle on the existing property. It would not be transferable to vehicle or property, but you could continue to park that vehicle. Again, if you're legal today, you can continue to do what you're doing. Oh, and I would add too that the discussion has been that there be a limited time where you could apply for that permit. Right now, I think 180 days is what's being recommended.
If we could control the conversations in the room, that'd be appreciated. The noise really travels.
The third amendment that was proposed was related to loading and unloading. The current language allows for, and again, this would apply to those vehicles that are not allowed to be parked permanently. There's a provision where you can park for unloading and unloading, a limited number of days per month. And that applies to RVs, it applies to anything that you know, if you consider a trailer longer than 20 feet, if you consider an RV that doesn't qualify, or even a heavy commercial vehicle such as a moving truck or something like that. We currently allow 2 occurrences during a 30-day period, and each occurrence cannot exceed 48 hours. The recommendation is to simplify that language to provide a maximum number of days per calendar month, and that any occurrence would equal 1 day. And again, that's to make the ordinance simpler for residents to understand and for staff to understand. And then there would be also an opportunity for council to consider the appropriate number of days and possibly increasing what we currently allow today. So with that, that is what is on the table, so to speak. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I appreciate that, and most of the questions will come at council discussion on the 16th when we do the discussion. One other point of reference, the 3 amendments, potential amendments that Mr. Sturzman mentioned, those came from the Public Safety Committee from their subsequent meeting after the Planning Commission. That does not prohibit any individual council member from bringing additional amendments on the 16th, and that's when that will occur. If council members have amendments they want to bring forth, again, tonight's to listen, and then on the 16th, if they have amendments, they'll bring those forth, and we'll work through all the individual amendments. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will open the public hearing. I will first call for proponents. Anybody that want to speak in favor? Seeing none. Opponents. And again, and there is a sign-up sheet that is routing. I still would ask you to state your name for the record, but if you could sign that sheet, that will help us on the minutes. But more important, if a council member has a question as they're working through maybe some ideas on amendments, that would give them some good contact information to reach back as well. So please fill that out. And again, the 5-minute time limit.